Welcome back. It's been a busy week for President Trump's pardon power. The White House yesterday said the president officially signed pardons for reality TV personalities Todd and Julie Chrisley, who were convicted of fraud in 2022. He also signed pardons for former New York Republican Congressman Michael Grimm, who pled guilty to tax fraud. Former Connecticut Republican Governor John Rowland, who pled guilty to conspiracy, and also a commutation for gang leader Larry Hoover, who was serving 6 life sentences. Some of the other notable pardons of Mr. Trump's second term include several individuals and groups of people who claim to be victims of Trump's political enemies. Responding to a question in the Oval Office yesterday, President Trump said he is looking into another pardon for the men who were convicted of trying to kidnap Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer, saying the trail looked to him like, quote, somewhat of a railroad job. The trial looked to him like a railroad job. Governor Whitmer responded earlier today.
Very disappointed that they're even considering it, frankly. When the president was shot at in Pennsylvania, I was one of the first people on either side of the aisle to condemn it. We have to condemn political violence, no matter where it comes from, no matter who it's aimed at. It does a disservice to everyone if we do anything short of that. And so I'll be making my thoughts known to the White House, and I hope they take it into consideration.
Joining me now with the very latest is NBC News White House correspondent Yamiche Alcindor. Yamiche, thanks so much for joining me this afternoon. So what do you make of the fact that there's been so much pardon activity right now? What are your sources telling you about the timing?
Well, Kristen, it's a good question because there is this question of why are all these pardons happening now? And in talking to experts as well as legal analysts, they tell me that this is really about President Trump looking at these pardons as a sort of messaging tool. He's messaging on financial crimes. He's using these pardons to attack his predecessor, former President Biden, in some cases saying that it was Biden's corrupt DOJ that went after people. We saw that in the January 6th pardons, but we also see that in some of these federal crimes. There's also this sense that he's pardoning people that he feels like are supporters of him. So Ed Martin said, no MAGA left behind me, no Make America Great Again supporter left behind, Ed Martin being, of course, his pardon attorney. So they're making it very plain that this is not just about sort of who they feel like may have been wrongly convicted, but this is also about political loyalties, which is a very interesting thing for the president to be doing. But he's not being at all sort of trying to hide it. He's being very transparent about the idea that some of these people donated millions of dollars. In one case, it was a man's mother who donated more than $1 million, and then he was pardoned. So that's sort of what we're seeing at the Trump White House, and I expect that we're going to continue to see this.
Yeah, obviously, his comments about those who were convicted of plotting to kidnap Governor Gretchen Whitmer of Michigan, those comments getting a lot of attention, a lot of pushback, including from the governor herself. What do you make of the fallout, Yamiche, and where does this debate or discussion go from here?
It's interesting. I'm not quite sure where it's going to go from here because you have Gretchen Whitmer, somebody as the governor of Michigan who's come into the White House, had one-on-one meetings with President Trump. Her answer there, I think, was very politically neutral in some ways in that she's saying, look, I was very concerned when someone was after you, and when you face your own assassination attempt, I would hope that you would also take my life seriously when it was threatened by these people. That being said, the fact that President Trump is openly talking about this and the fact that he's saying that these people may have been railroaded, that's definitely giving a lot of people in Michigan, sources that I'm talking to, heart palpitations, because this was a very, very serious plot to kidnap and kill the governor of Michigan. The other thing is, though, that some of this could just, again, be political messaging. So if at some point someone in the Trump administration has the president's ear and convinces him that pardoning these people is going to be like partnering the January 6th rioters, then they might actually be successful in getting this pardon done, Kristen.
All right. Well, I know you will continue to watch it very closely. Yamiche, thank you so much. Great to see you as always.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.